is a time when the fall leaves are changing. The smell of candy is in the air, and families get dressed up in costumes to gather downtown for this annual event. Monsters, superheroes, the Pumpkin Princess, and the mysterious Mr. or Miss Jack-o'-lantern gather under the moonlight amongst the townspeople to bear witness to a night unlike any other in Rutland history. So join me as we dig up the body parts of history, sew them together, and bring to life this monster documentary we call the Rutland Halloween Parade, Hijinks and History. Following the first Rutland Halloween Parade's unfortunate lackluster showing in 1959, a motivated Tom Fagan, local writer, lifelong Halloween enthusiast, and comic book fan, went to see Rutland's Recreation and Parks Department Superintendent John Chiafretti. Fagan had said to John after the parade, "That was good, but it could be better." And so he began sharing his ideas. As he later remarked, "We should have a theme for this, because it's Halloween. These are creatures of the night. You should have Batman as the leader of the parade." Chiafretti liked Fagan's enthusiasm and appointed him Parade General Chairman. Fagan's inspiration came from that very same first parade in 1959 that he took his daughter to see. It was there he saw William Chiafretti, son of John, dressed in a comic book costume. Said Fagan, "I always maintained that he was the first comic book character in our parade." Reflecting on his memories of the first parade, Fagan said it consisted of a couple of high school bands and an assortment of children in costumes. But from that auspicious beginning would grow a mighty oak with countless long-reaching branches through the echoes of time. Fagan was allowed to shape the parade in his vision starting in 1960 with this Batman float. His daughter Deanna, dressed as Batmite, stands proudly, perhaps ready to fly away into the night. Soon, as Fagan recalled, "I wrote letters to Detective Comics saying Batman was now the leader of the Rutland Halloween Parade, and we were establishing a tradition." It wasn't long before Fagan's correspondence as a fan turned into an even friendlier relationship with the creators of his favorite comics, including several staff writers at DC Comics in New York City. Fagan would ultimately invite them to the Rutland Parade to join in on the festivities. As a longtime contributor to comic book fan magazines, Fagan had letters promoting the parade published in a number of DC and Marvel titles, including DC's Detective Comics number 327, May 1964, and Marvel's Avengers number 88 in May of 1971. Rutland Herald's coverage of the parade on November 1st, 1960 opened with Police and Ghosts. Busy. Early in the evening is the parade, and later is the pranks. Some pranks included the mysterious black cat being left at 60 Church Street, meowing at the residents. The cat was described as wearing 3 unusual-sounding bells and 7 toes on each paw. Albert Laseth of 223 Lincoln Avenue described his glasses suddenly vanishing while haunting the neighbors. His mother quoted him as saying, "He felt no ghostly hand remove them." Some spectators of the parade witnessed creepy dressed creatures following the Rutland and MSJ bands in the procession. Everyone had become who they secretly dreamed of being, with even a couple dressed as Mr. and Mrs. Zorro. At the end, in 1960, Rutlanders were told that the true outcome of that year's parade would not be fully felt until the next day, when they could once again put out their trash and take in the Rutland Herald. By the time the 1961 parade arrived, it was themed Creatures of the Night, and the Tom Fagan era was fully off and running. Looking back to the 61 parade, he recalled, "You could come as you wanted. It was a night to become whomever you secretly wished to be." The fully realized vision was very well received by everyone in attendance. As it grew, DC, Marvel, and even Mad Magazine got in on the act with their own floats as part of the parades. There was as many as 181 different comic book characters represented over the years at the parade and celebration, as Fagan recalled. In 1965, the Joker, Plastic Man, and Doctor Strange were roaming the streets of Rutland, along with Batman, presumably Fagan, but like Bruce Wayne, the Caped Crusader wouldn't divulge his identity. More comic book heroes appeared every year, according to a 2008 Comic Buyer's Guide obituary of Fagan. The parade continued to grow, including floats on flatbed trailers, and changes to the set parade path to discover the most sensible route over the coming years. 1965 would also see the birth of another long-running tradition, when the very first pumpkin princess was crowned.
I'll get it. Thousand spectators watched the 11th annual parade in 1970, with marchers who included more comic book characters, the likes of the Black Panther, Scarlet Witch, Black Widow, Medusa, Captain America, and others. Riding on a float were Thor and Sif, along with the Norn Queen. Even the Red Skull hitched a ride. Also present were Nighthawk, Batman, and Captain Marvel. The parade kicked off and ended with the familiar cry, "Avengers, assemble!" After visiting the parade, comic book writer Roy Thomas was inspired to set a story there. In Avengers number 83, Come On In, The Revolution's Fine. December 1970. Tom Fagan, dressed as Nightwing of the Defenders, invites the Avengers to be his guests of honor at the 11th annual parade. The parade is attacked by the Masters of Evil, who hijack Fagan's float. The fight turns into a three-way battle when the Lady Liberators enter the fray. The issue was not only set at the parade, but also featured appearances by Roy Thomas himself, along with his wife Jeannie. The next year, in Batman number 237, Night of the Reaper, December 1971, creators Danny O'Neil and Neil Adams were inspired to craft a story set in Rutland. In that tale, a vendetta between a concentration camp survivor and a fugitive Nazi plays out in the backdrop of the Halloween parade. Batman and Robin try to stop the violent bloodshed that ensues as innocent revelers dressed up like the Cape Crusader and Boy Wonder get caught in the middle. Dick Grayson attends the parade with friends, comic book creators Alan Weiss, Bernie Wrighton, and Jerry Conway. Batman's fight spills into Tom Fagan's mansion, where Danny O'Neil, Len Wein, and Mark Hennerfeld are in attendance. As more comic book creators ventured north, their stories about the parade grew grander. Comic book writer Engelhardt explained, Tom Fagan was just a real friendly guy, and a real friend to everybody. He could get you caught up in his enthusiasms and share yours. Along with Len Wein and Jerry Conway, Englehart made comic book history by writing the first Marvel DC crossover, albeit unofficially, by setting it at the Rutland Halloween Parade. In Englehart's Amazing Adventures number 16, and the Juggernaut will get you if you don't watch out! January 1973, Jerry Conway, Steve Englehart, and Len and Glynis Wein come across Hank McCoy, aka The Beast, on their way to the Rutland Halloween Parade. The blue-furred mutant finally gets to town, just in time to stop a rampaging Juggernaut who has lost control of his powers. He attempts to steal Englehart's car, but is intercepted by Beast and disappears into the woods. Then, in Len Wein's Justice League of America, number 103, A Stranger Walks Among Us, December 1972. The four comic creators make their way to the mansion of Tom Fagan, who is sporting his best Batman costume. The Phantom Stranger leads the Justice League to Rutland on the suspicion that Felix Faust is attempting to take advantage and summon ghosts to our reality. The JLA meet up with Tom, who asks them to ride in the parade. While waving to the crowd, Faust's plan kicks into effect, and the JLA must contend with a town full of Rutland citizens gaining the powers of their costumed characters, including Glynis Wein, who turns into Supergirl. Len, Steve, and Jerry go after Glynis, while the Phantom Stranger intervenes to save the League. With his plan foiled, Faust escapes town by stealing Englehart's car. Finally, in Jerry Conway's The Mighty Thor, number 207, Fire Sword, January 1973, Tom Fagan has switched into an authentic-looking Nightwing costume, but has fallen under the mind control of Loki, who is summoning Absorbing Man to destroy the town. Thor, Sif, and Hildegard intervene to defeat the Absorbing Man and Loki, blinding the trickster god in the process. Loki hears the Faust-driven stolen car of Steve Englehart and rushes after it, but in his blind state leads him right off a cliff. Len, Steve, and Jerry locate the missing, and now human again, Glynis, who doesn't quite remember what just happened. Meanwhile, comic fans had their mind blown after reading the very first DC Marvel crossover. For Englehart, Wein, and Conway, it was the chance to try something new. As Englehart told Comics Alliance, I guess the first year, the comic book guys were just a handful amongst the revelers, but the second year, there were a whole bunch of comic book people who thought it would be a good idea to go to Vermont for the Rutland Halloween Parade. Most amazingly to Englehart, the crossover idea had modest yet imaginative motivations. As he elaborated, the idea of doing a crossover between Marvel and DC, I'm not sure anything like that had been done before, but it certainly seemed like a radical concept. We knew that we had to be subtle, and each story had to stand on its own, but we really worked it out. It's really worthwhile to read those stories back to back to back. It didn't matter to us that one was DC and two were at Marvel. I think it was us being creative, thinking that would be really cool to do, and that the spark of it all was the Rutland Halloween Parade, which was really cool, and it deserved something really cool. Fagan persuaded some of them to take part in the Rutland Halloween Parade in comic book character costumes. Many of the comic creators stayed as guests at Fagan's 24-room mansion outside of Rutland, which is now a bed and breakfast. Comic book creators known to have attended the parade over the years include Steve Englehart, Jerry Conway, Marv Wolfman, Bernie Wrightson, Dennis O'Neil, Roy Thomas, Alan Weiss, Wendy and Richard Pinney, Dave Cockrum, and Len Wein. As one of the costume revelers, Englehart has vivid memories of the parties which took place in that old mansion. Englehart said, "It's not that unusual if you go to a comic book convention today. You're going to see a lot of people in costume. But for us in the early 1970s, that was not a common situation, and even at the conventions, they were a lot more buttoned down then." So on Halloween night in those days, well after midnight, walking around this mansion in Vermont and seeing Dracula, the Hulk, and Wonder Woman walking around, it was a unique situation, and on Fagan's end, handled extremely well. From around 1966 to 1975, there was friendly competition between Gotham City and Metropolis to see who could feature the best comic book story set in Rutland, Vermont. The date of the parade had been changed a few times in its history, like in 1975, for example, when it was scheduled for October 31st.
Trick or treat! Trick or treat! Trick or treat!
Official superheroes from DC and Marvel would show up. One such case in the parade of 1986 was Marvel sending their official Spider-Man to take part in the event, to the awe and wonderment of the children in attendance. In 1987, superheroes made room for a Halloween parade wedding as the November 1st, 1987 Herald proclaimed, "Halloween Parade has a nuptial twist." Michael Durkin's favorite holiday growing up was Halloween. On his first date with Bonnie Hudson, they attended the famous Rutland Halloween Parade. They fell in love and decided Halloween would be a great time to get married. And so, as part of the parade of 1987, Michael, dressed as King Henry VIII, wedded Bonnie Hudson, dressed in a 16th century styled wedding dress, with the assurance of her husband that her fate would not at all be similar to the wives of the real King Henry VIII. Michael, for some odd reason, asked his dad to dress as an iguana. But instead, his father opted to dress as vintage gangster Al Capone. Michael's mother enjoyed the idea and dressed as a 1920s flapper, joking, "Aren't wedding dresses and tuxedos costumes also?" The whole wedding party rode on a float with a marvelous satin coat of arms that read, "Love and Honor." The young couple, along with their party, proceeded to the Ritz Club to continue their celebration. In 1993, one of the most unusual parades in history would unfold, as the cold, wet rain with snow and wind gusts from an impending storm had rolled into town. Santa Claus would show up in a red convertible, claiming his off-season job was at the local Honda dealership. Even Miss Piggy and Kermit the Frog were spotted one year taking a spin as good boys and ghouls watched on. The creativity of the floats and costumes continued unabated, and it became pretty difficult to award prizes due to the amount of ingenuity and imagination on display year after year. By the time the 90s arrived, the parade averaged 65 to 70 units rolling down the streets for all to enjoy, and even the school bands changed. At one time, what had only been local in-city school bands had grown to include bands from all over the county. By this point, bands had also decided it would be fun to dress up in costumes to wear while they marched. Part of the traditions of the parade was, and still is, having an annual pumpkin princess and a Mr. or Miss Jack-o'-lantern. Every year, a new pumpkin princess would be picked and ride in the parade. As mentioned earlier, this tradition of the pumpkin princess began in 1965. Mr. or Miss Jack-o'-lantern began before the parade was even born. It was a local Halloween radio contest where listeners would be given a few clues about the mystery person under the pumpkin mask. Whoever guessed correctly would win a prize. This 1957 photo, State's Attorney Theodore Corsones is revealed as Mr. Jack-o'-lantern. Children often won a brand new bike for guessing correctly. Over the years, the Pumpkin Princess and Mr. or Miss Jack-o'-lantern both would make their presence known in the annual Halloween parade.
In one of his interviews in 2008, Fagan, in his late 70s, had said, "I think if I pass over around Halloween time, I will be riding in a casket in the parade. I would be all for that." Unfortunately, Fagan would pass away on October 21st, 2008. While his daughter Deanna said she had not heard that request prior, she did agree that her dad would definitely have been happy about the idea. Friend and fellow co-worker Nick Merrow chuckled while saying, he would have loved that. Knowing Tom, he would have wanted it to be an open casket too, as that was the kinda ghoulish guy he was. As the Rutland Herald wrote in its October 23rd issue that year, Tom Fagan was a number of things during a lifetime of newspaper reporting, raising a family, and assuming legendary status in the comic book community. But in Rutland, where the 77-year-old lived before his death, he was known as Mr. Halloween, the man who helped create an All Hallows Eve procession of ghosts, ghouls, and costume greats. Although Fagan passed away in 2008, the parade has endured as his legacy. And so, friends, I wish you a happy Halloween. But beware, as the cold night's chill creeps by you, and the sweet scent of Cinderella's sweets dances on the gentle breeze of the past. Giggle at your fancy imagination, and just tell yourself, it was our old friend Tom Fagan, smiling down with pride at how we all together, generations of Rutlanders and our surrounding neighbors, have kept this spooky, fun-filled tradition alive and well through the ages. This is your narrator, saying, good night out there, whatever you are.
Strange noises coming from a house on the hill. So I crept up to the window and looked over the sill. My heart almost stopped, I nearly died of fright. By the dim candlelight I saw the strangest sight. There was Frankenstein and Dracula and Wolfman too, dancing with some zombies, what a ghastly crew. Viola the vampire was doing the bop, and everything was rocking at the monster's pop. That empty house upon the hill. The night I saw the monsters dancing, ooh, what a thrill. The wind did howl, the night was black. I nearly lost my mind, I'm never ever going back. There was Frankenstein and Dracula and Wolfman too, dancing with some zombies, what a ghastly crew. Viola